Okay, so in the last video we kind of saw what the condition of this engine was. It does kind of have a bit of a low compression, kind of a lot of leak down percentage, and visually when it's running I've seen a pretty significant amount of blow by coming through it. And like I said, several times in the previous video, the only way I can really fix that properly is to pull the engine, disassemble it, have it bored, and get some new pistons in it. But so what I did is I gave the machine shop a call that did the cylinder heads for me, and it looks like, and I haven't had an engine bored and honed in a pretty long time, but it was almost $500 at that shop to bore and hone this engine, and I assume that would mean cleaning it too, like hot tanking it and stuff. That would need to be done. So I don't know what that stuff is that they use to clean the blocks with, but I'm guessing it's probably hard on the camshaft bearings and stuff like that, and it's probably not very good for the cam bearings, and it's probably not very good for the soft plugs. So I'll probably have to replace the cam bearings and the soft plugs when I do that, so more than likely, and that'd be my guess. So between the machine work and all the parts, new pistons, it looks like this is going to be over $800 to fix, make it right. And that's not something I can just do. I mean, that's something I'd have to budget for. I can't just run around spending $800 for a YouTube video. And that's really what this engine is. This isn't an engine that I have plans for to put in a car, at least not for the time being. This is just an engine that I'm using to make some, trying to do my best to make some interesting YouTube videos out of it. But yeah, so that's, if I do go that route, it's going to have to be something I'm really going to have to think about and budget for, probably for months in advance. And the other thing of it is that I really don't like building engines in the middle of winter. I've done it before, and it's a pain, because when you get the engine back from the machine shop, you really need to wash it yourself. I mean, the machine shop's going to do a pretty good job of cleaning it for you, but really it's up to you to clean it. And the way I do it is I don't have a garage where I can spray water around on the inside, in the middle of January, and it's not going to work out for me. So the way I wash them is out in the driveway, with preferably on like the hottest day of the year, and with the garden hose and some hot soapy water is usually the way I get it there, and then I run the brushes through the oil passages and everything, just get that thing just as clean as I can get it, which is something I can't really do in the wintertime. At least I can do it, but I have to pick the right day, and it's an unpleasant. I have to get like like a raincoat on. It's a cold, unpleasant thing to have to do. So I don't want to. So number one, I don't want to spend the money right now, or at least I can't spend the money right now on fixing this. And I don't want to do the engine rebuild in wintertime. And the other reason I don't like doing the winter time rebuilds is because when I measure the parts, they've often sat in the garage overnight without the heat on, and they're cold, and it throws all the dimensions off, and then my micrometers are cold and everything's cold, and it's not with the garage that I've got and the setup that I've got, building engines in the wintertime is just not ideal. I guess that's just the way I'm going to put it. So what I want to kind of do though is, I kind of want to make the best of a bad situation. So I have an engine that has blow-by, right? And the thing that I've been wanting to do for a while, and just haven't done yet, but I've been thinking about it, is making a meter, a blow-by meter, so that you can actually measure the amount of blow-by coming out of the crankcase while the engine is running. And the way I could do this is, if I do it right, I can get those blow-by flow rates piped into my data acquisition computer, and we can actually record the blow-by while the engine's running at different speeds and loads. And I think that would be some pretty interesting data to look at, if I can get it to work. So that's what this video is going to be about. It's probably going to take me several parts, because I've never done this before from scratch. I mean, I've used flow meters obviously, but I've never made one from scratch aside from that one that's in my flow bench, which is, I guess in that sense I have made a flow meter before. But and then the way the flow bench works is going to be very similar to the way this blow-by meter works. But it'll remain to be seen if I can actually make it work, make it accurate, make it repeatable, and get that data flowing into the data acquisition computer. And if I can do that, I think that would be some pretty interesting numbers to have, and a pretty powerful diagnostic tool to look at, especially maybe not right at the beginning, but over time, maybe different engines coming in and out and recording it and seeing what these blow-by numbers are for each one. Start building a library of knowledge about what those numbers should be and what they are on a worn out engine and what they are on a new engine, and kind of just how things go as they break. Another thing you can look at is how does that number change as the engine breaks in. There's a lot you can learn from the flow rate of the blow-by coming out of the engine. So, like I said, that's what this video is going to be about. So let's go to the whiteboard and show you some of the principles of the blow-by meter that I have in mind. What I'll start out by saying is that the type of flow meter that I intend to build is a Venturi flow meter. So that'd be the inlet of the Venturi, and the gases will flow that way. So the equation that I'm kind of using up here, that's a derivation of the Bernoulli equation, and I don't want to really get into the Bernoulli equation and proof it out myself, because I just really haven't done that type of thinking in a long time, and I don't really feel qualified right at the moment to prove how this equation got derived from the Bernoulli equation. But what I'll tell you about that is that the Bernoulli equation is a very common, it's a well-known equation. If you want to learn more about it, there's information on that. You can just Google search, or I'm sure you'll find a lot of information about that equation. And if you want to find this equation online, you can either go to Wikipedia and search Venturi effect or something like that. And then there's another place where you can find this, is if you do a Venturi search for, there's a website called Engineering Toolbox. If you go to that site, you'll find an equation that looks very similar to this. And actually there's one in there that, on the Engineering Toolbox website, there's one that's identical to this. Now the difference between the one, there's another version of this out there that uses different values for here and different exponents for this value here, because they use areas there instead of diameters in this section here. But in this equation, we're using diameters. So that's where you can find this equation, and like I said, it's a derivation. It's derived from the Bernoulli equation. And to give you just a rough idea what that equation is that it's an energy balance equation, and the idea is that if you've got fluid or gases flowing through a pipe, well, technically fluids, incompressible fluids, and that would be the other thing about this, is that this the Bernoulli equation that this is from is the Bernoulli equation for incompressible flow, and but I'll talk a little bit more about that later, or quite soon. So, but the idea is that the principle in the Bernoulli equation, it's an energy balance, and if you got fluid flowing through a pipe and there's a restriction in it, that the flow of energy at any point in the pipe has to be the same, because it's kind of it's a principle that, energy, it's kind of an idealization, because it assumes probably that there's no heat flowing into the pipe or out of the pipe, so it's not like you got hot water in a cold pipe, it's like that everything's the same. There's a name for that, but I can't really think what it is right now. But the idea is that there's no energy flowing into the system, or no heat energy flowing into the system, and no heat energy flowing out of the system. But if you assume that, and then there's fluids flowing through a pipe, you can gather that at each point in the pipe, the flow rate of energy is the same. So, and that's the principle of that stuff. So, but at any rate, like I said, if you want to look into that, you can. It's out there, and it's a very well established principle. So let's talk about how I'm going to use this equation and what the variables are in the equation. So this V here, it's actually a V dot, and that represents the volumetric flow rate. This A stands for area, and it's the area of this part of the venturi. And that's the way I studied it. That's what I think they mean by this area here. That should be that area of this part of the venturi. The C sub D is called a discharge coefficient, and kind of what it is it's a way of correcting your meters to what you're correcting your meter to whatever the meter calibrated out to. So you can use that to kind of calibrate your equation to meet the characteristics of the meter, but you have to do that kind of experimentally. At least that's the way I look at it with a venturi. There's other ways, there's other types of meters, but I'm not going to get into those. Okay, so what we have over here is, this is the pressure. This P1 would be a pressure measured in here someplace, and I forgot to put that in there, but probably I'm going to measure it somewhere around in there. And then P2 is probably measured around in there someplace, maybe here, but at any rate there'd be a pressure probe that comes off of here. So there'd be like a pressure probe here, and then you'd connect your hose to this, and it would go off to your pressure sensor or manometer or whatever you have to do that with. So pressure 1 is here, pressure 2 is here, and so that's rho, and what that is the density of the fluid that you're going to be, whether it's water or whatever you have, that's the density of the fluid going through it. And this B here is defined over here, and that's defined as the ratio of that diameter divided by that diameter. That's what that is, and like I said before, this is for incompressible flow. Now there is a Bernoulli equation for compressible flow, and it is very complicated, and I'm not going to use it. So, but the good news is that if the Mach number of the flow flowing through your venturi is below 0.3, then it's kind of, you know, it's not exactly perfect, but it works good enough. So if your Mach number of your fluid going through here is less than 0.3, then you can kind of use this equation for incompressible flow with fluids like a gas that are compressible. So like I said, keep the Mach number under 0.3 and you can kind of use this, although it's not perfect. But I'm not going to try to make a NASA grade meter here. I just need something that's kind of good enough. When it comes to designing it, what I need to figure out is how big a diameter do I want that to be? How big of a diameter do I want that to be? What should this angle here be? What should that angle be? So, a venturi is a thing that's been around for a very long time, and there's a lot of information out there known about it. The values I saw for that angle there, I saw anywhere between 15 and 30 degrees there, and for this angle here I think I saw anywhere from 5 to 15 degrees there. To start, I'm going to go with a 20 degree angle here, and I'm going to go with a 7 degree angle here. And I'm probably going to have to go through several iterations of this to get it into where I want it to be before it's, you know, sized properly for the application. And because right at the moment, I don't really know what the flow rate of even on this pretty worn out engine with a lot of blow by, I don't really know what the flow rate coming out of the crankcase is going to be. I don't know that yet, so it's probably going to take me a few times to get these dimensions right. And then kind of what you're doing here is, in terms of these diameters, is I'll be tailoring how quickly the gas goes through it. And the faster the idea here is that the faster that the gases move through it, the higher the pressure drop is here across these two ports. And that is the same principle that makes your carburetor work. The venturi in there works the same way. So we got to do some thinking to figure out what this diameter here is and what the ratio between these two diameters should be. And this angle here and this angle here, I think I'm probably pretty okay with what I'm starting with. But we're going to have to figure that out. And then after we've built a prototype, we ought to probably figure out a way to test it. And I think maybe what I might do is at least try to put it on my flow bench and kind of ballpark it that way. And then the other thing about this is well, I think for the general assumption, if you don't have really a good starting point with the discharge coefficient for a Venturi like this is like 0.98. So we'll probably start with that. The way I'm going to make this is with a 3D printer, and that should probably be okay. So we'll do that, and then go in the house. We'll have a look at the a cross section of the first Venturi I've started to make, and I'll show you how I ballparked what these diameters are and where I want to start with. And I'll show you how I got there, and I have an Excel spreadsheet set up so that we can change those parameters quickly and kind of hone in on a starting point for the size of this Venturi. All right, let's go do that. Okay, so here's that. This is that 3D printed model that I started with. It's so what I did was I started the printer, and then about halfway through the print, I stopped it, and then I just took some masking tape here and covered up this part of it to give it kind of a contrast, so you can see the shape of the Venturi that I came up with. And we're starting out with 1 inch here, 0.3 inches here, 20 degrees here, 7 degrees here, and this is also 1 inch here. So, and estimating the discharge coefficient at 0.98, and then you can kind of see what it kind of looks like from the end. So there's that. This is probably the first of many attempts to make this thing. And the other thing I wanted to show you real quick was I found these. And what it is a pressure transducer, and I'm assuming that you take that the hose goes onto there and it measures the pressure, and it's probably I'm gonna guess it's probably, I don't know if it's gonna be absolute pressure or gauge pressure, but it doesn't matter. At any rate, so I got a package of these for a package of 6, I think. There were like 6 of them for like $16 or something like that. I'm not quite sure how they're gonna interface with my my computers yet, but we'll figure that out when we get there, and that'll be a different video how we get these in there. So we'll use 2 of these, and then one of them, the pressure port will come off of here and into one of these, and another pressure port will come out from here and into another one of those, and then basically we'll read those 2 signals in and subtract the 2, and that'll be the delta P across from here to here. So, and then that's the delta P we're going to use in the equation that we're going to look at next. So here's the spreadsheet that I came up with that uses that equation that we saw on the whiteboard. And okay, so that's up here, that's the equation that we had on the whiteboard in the garage. And so, and you can kind of, if you can figure out by looking at this that A2 is right here. There's B2, and you know, the other thing is I set this up so that I could enter the diameters of those parts of the Venturi in inches, although the equation is going to use MKS units, so it's going to be meters, kilograms, seconds. So we'll start here. This is the area of this diameter here. That's our discharge coefficient. I have this set up for later, but for right now I'm just using I'm just entering a delta P in. I'm just kind of, just to get started, I'm using just a 1 inch diameter, because I think that's I don't know, that just seems like an okay place to start for me. And then 3/10 of that, you know, I looked up some ratios for these, which would basically be that, and they start at like 0.2 and go up to, you know, I forget how high they go up, but they start around 0.2, 0.3, so that's where I'm going to start. So 1 inch there, 0.3 inches there. This here is just these values here converted into meters. So, and that value there is that divided by that. And over here is the density of air at 20 degrees Celsius in 1 atmosphere. And I did a quick look on, just a quick search to see what the density of exhaust gas is. The density of gas is coming out of the exhaust pipe. The makeup of blow-by gases is very, very similar, if not exactly the same, as the makeup of the exhaust gases coming out of the tailpipe. So, and what they showed, what the rough estimate that I saw was what, or how should I say, what the internet says that it is. And, you know, taking that with a grain of salt. They said it was 1.2 to 1.3 kilograms per meter cube, which is really very similar to what the air is, what regular air is at 20 degrees C in 1 atmosphere. So that's the value I'm going to start with that. The next thing I want to talk about is this pressure here. So that's 40,000 pascals or 40 kilopascals. And that transducer, that pressure transducer I showed you before, it was advertised as having a range of 0 to 40 kilopascals. So what this transducer can read, I'm using that as a parameter in the design of the Venturi. Okay, so that was one parameter I was using to start designing the Venturi. And then the next one was I looked around to see what kind of what a normal blow-by rate would be, or what an excessively high blow-by rate would be. And I heard everything from 2 to 100 CFM. And 100 seems like an awful lot. And honestly, 24, even 24, 25 seems like an awful lot too. But I figure that's probably an okay place to start. And so the two parameters I'm using to get started with the design is that the full range scale of the pressure transducer, and what the maximum flow rate that the Venturi can measure will be. So I have that there. I'm going to say about 25 CFM is the most I want to be able to measure with it. And the pressure drop across the Venturi, the delta P right here, will be no more than 40,000. So at a 40,000 pascal pressure drop across through the Venturi, that correlate to a roughly 25 CFM flow rate. So those were the parameters that I used, and then what I did was I figured I wanted to start roughly with a 1-inch diameter Venturi inlet, and then, well, at any rate, so I just moved these numbers around until I got this to come out the way I wanted it. It was just an iterative process that I used. Alright, so that's about as far as I'm going to go this week. I'm kind of running out of time. But next week I think we'll get a Venturi made and maybe get it out to the garage and maybe put it on the flow bench and start testing it and see if we got close to the numbers that we want to get to here. So alright, that's all I got for this week, and we'll see you next time.